Okay, welcome back. I just want to draw your attention to a few points from the fourth stanza. Here John gives a much shorter commentary and in fact only comments on the beginning of the fourth. The rest he says, I just can't say any more. He has come to the very edges of anything that he can put into language. So all the time he's speaking about this deep love, this union of love that's happening in the deepest centre. And here in this stanza, there are two things in particular that he speaks about. Firstly, the awakening of God in the soul, and secondly, the breathing of God within. Awakening and breath. And what that brings about. Just a bit of it here from this introduction to this. And thus it is as though the soul were to say, how gently and lovingly, that is extremely loving and gentle, is your awakening. O bridegroom, word, in the centre and depth of my soul, which is its pure and intimate substance, in which secretly and silently, as its only Lord, you dwell alone, not only as in your house, nor only as in your bed, but also as in my own heart, intimately and closely united to it. How delicately you captivate me and arouse my affections towards you in the sweet breathing you produce in this awakening, a breathing delightful to me and full of good and glory. That's hence it is the same as what's in the verse of the stanza, put into prayer form. It's the soul, the person, addressing the God who lives within. Who lives in this deepest centre. Or, as it appears to the person, has become awake and alive, awakened and breathing, living. So, the particular characteristic of this awakening that John draws our attention to is this. He says, here lies the remarkable delight of this awakening. The soul knows creatures through God and not God through creatures. In other words, we look out there at creation and the beauty of it, and it draws our minds and our hearts towards the Creator, towards God. But now, because the person is seeing, not through human eyes, but through the light of the God that dwells there within, the person is seeing creation as God sees it. A very different image. Much deeper, much more complete, and also much freer. So the person is no longer constrained. And for those of you familiar with John's spiritual canticle, you'll see this worked out in the early stanzas of the canticle. The person who has been awakened, made aware, wounded, goes in search of the beloved. And beautiful passages there about creation and what creation does is reminds the person of the beloved. Because like the great artist, there's always something of the artist in what he has created. And so these act as reminders, but instead of giving satisfaction and consolation, they do the opposite. They make the person hunger and thirst and search more frantically, because they're signs of the one that she loves, but they're not the lover. The lover, he has left traces of himself, so she has to search further and further and further, because she has been touched by God, and nothing will satisfy except God. But it is not a rejection of creation or people or the world or anything, but rather it is a journey that's going to lead to a capacity to love in a much deeper and fuller and more complete way. And that's what we see here. The person is now seeing and loving through the God who is within. And so things are known in a very different way. Now, and it appears that it's God who has awakened within. But of course, it is not. It's the soul that has awakened. But it will appear as if it is God. So we then ought to say that in this movement is the soul that is moved and awakened from sleep, of natural vision to supernatural vision. It says God always acts in this way, moving, governing, bestowing, being, power, graces and gifts on all creatures, bearing them all in himself by his power, presence and substance. And the soul sees what God is in himself and what he is in his creatures in only one view. So the soul now is seeing God and creation as one. God and what God has created is one. They're not separate. So just as one who is opening the door of a palace beholds in one act the eminence of the person who dwells inside, together with what the sovereign is doing. So the person and what they're doing is all seen in one. Because it's seen through the lamps, the wisdom that God gives. John goes on to explain this further, because clearly he knows that we struggle to understand what he's saying. So he gives us some illustrations here from human life to help us to see what he's saying. So, such is the lowliness of our condition in this life. For we think others are like ourselves, and we judge others according to what we ourselves are, since our judgment arises from within us and not outside of us. Thus, the thief thinks others also steal, and the lustful think others are lustful too, and the malicious think others also bear malice. Their judgment stemming from their own malice, and the good think well of others, for their judgment flows from the goodness of their own thoughts. And to those who are careless and asleep, it seems that others are too. So that's sort of human nature. We see others from ourselves, from our own point of view, from where we are ourselves. That's a truth of human life. And so he's applying it here in two ways then. One is that we apply this to God. We think God is like us. So here's it. Hence it is that when we are careless and asleep in God's presence, it seems to us it is God who is asleep and neglectful in us. So we apply unto God what is our. God clearly is never asleep. But we think he is gone, he's missing, where is he? He's not doing anything. Why isn't he doing what I want him to do? Why isn't he answering my prayer? Why isn't he sorting this out? Why isn't he? Has he gone to sleep? We're putting on to God. But God is never neglectful. We're projecting onto God. But equally so when it comes to other people, or creation, or anything. We view it as real. So now the person is viewing everything through the God who is within. And so has God's way of looking at things. And God's way of loving. It is God has awakened within. The life of God, the wisdom of God, the vision of God has awakened within. So the person is awakened to a very, very different way of seeing things. Yet, since everything in human beings comes from God, and they of themselves can do nothing good, it is rightly asserted that our awakening is an awakening of God, and our rising is God's rising. So it appears as if it's the awakening of God, and as God's, whereas it is us. Since the soul was in a sleep from which it could never awaken itself, and only God could open its eyes and cause this awakening. Because only God can do. Only God can open our eyes. But, of course, we don't always like what he shows us. And we kind of want to close them again. Because what we see through our own eyes might suit us better than what God might be showing us. But here is God awakening, opening the eyes of the person. Here he puts it into prayer again. Awaken and enlighten us, my Lord, so that we might know and love the blessings that you ever propose to us, and we might understand that you have moved to bestow favours on us and have remembered us. Note carefully that prayer, how John has worded it. Awaken and enlighten us, my Lord. So, you need to awake and enlighten. There to God to do it. So that we might know and love the blessings that you ever proposed to. Know and love what you give us. Not what we might give ourselves, or think we have, or want ourselves. All of that has been cleansed and purified prior to this. The person now only knows and loves what God presents them, what God gives to the person. And that we might understand that you have moved to bestow favour on us and have remembered us, so that we may understand everything comes from you. It's this attitude of total gratitude. Everything comes from God. The need for something to come from me, the need for my contribution, my part in this has gone. It's not there. It's so unlike the prayer we would normally make, prayer of intercession that we might make. This is worldly. This comes from somebody who is awakened and enlightened by God, by the presence of God. So all of this, the entire living flame, as I said, is at the very beginning, is an entering deeply into the truth, the reality of those words of Jesus in John's Gospel, that the Father and the Son and the Spirit, Trinity, will come and make their home, will come and live in the person who loves them. And this whole work is an exploration or a celebration of that relationship of love, relationship of the Trinity and the person, the soul, entering into that relationship, becoming alive in that. So John here at the end gives us a paragraph which maybe might be helpful to us to get a perspective on all and see what this is. And is commenting on a verse that John has, where in secret you dwell alone. This place is addressing again the Trinity. In secret dwells alone. Because if anything else lives there, if anything else is drawing life there, then the person is not living the fullness of the life of God. God and God alone, and only God, can live in this deepest centre. And when it is only God, and God alone living there, then the person is fully alive. The person is living the fullness of life. And is loving the fullness of love, as the wisdom, the fullness of wisdom, and all of these other attributes that we saw earlier on. So here's how John speaks about it. The soul says he dwells in its heart, in secret, because this sweet embrace is wrought in the depths of its substance. Again, the depths of its... All the time John is trying to find a language to get us right to some very deep place in there. And we're just going through this and just seeing all the different ways he tries to depict this deepest centre, the heart of the centre of spirits, all kinds of ways he tries to express something that no words can, because no words are able to express what this place, it's not a place of course, so nothing, this centre, this, where this is happening, because it's depth and it is God and everything. So here it's in the depths of the substance. Okay. Here's what it is. It should be known that God dwells secretly in all souls and is hidden in their substance. Otherwise they would not last. That's a principle of John de Cross's teaching. He expresses it in the ascent of Mount Carmel, as a basic fundamental principle when he's defining what he means by union with God, which is the goal or the purpose of the spiritual life, to be united with God. And he's defining what he means by that, says, principle is that every person, no person would exist not united with God. We just wouldn't exist. And of course the implications of that both for how I see myself and how I see the other person. Because every other person is also somebody in whom God lives, whom God is united with, whom God is sustaining in existence. Okay. But as he says here, there is a difference. And that's what the flame is celebrating that difference. Not explaining the difference, but celebrating the difference. And here's the difference. There's a difference, a great difference in his dwelling in them. In some souls he dwells alone, and in others he does not dwell alone. So that's how he defines the difference. Alone and not being alone. Now, when he's not alone, it means that the person has other priorities, other habits, other addictions, other desires, other goals. But where he is alone, then that's the union. Abiding in some, he is pleased, and in others he is displeased. He lives in some as though in his own house, commanding and ruling everything, and in others as though a stranger in a strange house, where they do not permit him to give orders or to do anything. That's the difference. That's where God dwells in his own house, commanding and ruling everything, or where he's a stranger in a strange house. That is the difference. And the living flame here is a celebration of that house where he commands and rules, where he lives in freedom. So John goes on to define a little more in detail what this means. It is in the soul in which less of its own appetites and pleasures dwell, where he dwells more alone. Appetites and the pleasures, the words that John uses over and over again in his teaching. Put simply, they're everything that compromises our inner freedom. Everything that holds us bound in some way. Whether it is some ambition, some addiction, some obsession, some hurt, it could be something dysfunctional in our lives. Whatever it is that holds us bound, that compromises us. So to less of its own appetites and pleasures dwell, where he dwells more alone, more pleased, and more as though in his own house, ruling and governing it. And he dwells more in secret, the more he dwells alone. Again, that's important, the secret. We've seen that in various ways. But the dwelling alone is more secret, less known to the person, less obvious. It's all the different, the caverns, the feelings, the no feelings there, there's no, the more alone he is, the less it's, because it's deeper. It's not because we can be as attached to spiritual feelings as we can be to anything else. And therefore, secret is deeper than any spiritual feel, either feelings of his presence or feeling of his absence, because they can both profoundly mislead us, as we've seen. We can think God is present, but it's really only ourselves we're relying on our own feelings. we can believe him to be absent when actually the most profound and greatest feeling of absence is the strongest feeling of his presence. Because absence of its very nature is a sign of love. We can only miss someone we've loved. The deeper sense of absence and loss, the greater the love there must be there. So secretly dwells alone and in secret. Thus in this soul, in which neither any appetite, nor other image or forms, or any affections for created things dwells, the beloved dwells secretly, with an embrace so much closer, more intimate and interior, the purer and more alone the soul is to everything other than God. So, again, where he puts it, neither appetite nor other or any form or affectation lives, draws life. Other things aren't drawing life from him. From the depths it is God. God has awakened here. His dwelling is in secret then, because the devil cannot reach the area of this embrace, nor can the human intellect understand how it occurs. So neither the devil nor the human intellect can understand this. So a person cannot be misled because it is so secret. Can't be tempted out of this in some way. Neither can the human intellect reach it. Won't know. We won't know. Because if we knew, we would manipulate it and compromise and think it's not what it is, or misunderstand it, or whatever. So there he gives us just an image for us, maybe to help us to see what it is that John of the Cross has been making us aware of in this work, or heightening our awareness of. Because that's what the flame is all about. It's not about explaining something, but showing. As I mentioned the first evening, it's the artist. The artist showing us something. Or the great musician drawing us into an experience. Absorbing us in something. It's a work to be experienced, felt, tasted, rather than analysed. As I said, very appropriate for this season of Advent. As the season of Advent is about awaiting the Lord and opening ourselves more deeply to his coming to us and into us, and about a growing more deeply in our love and the Lord. So, we just finished with a word here from John himself, just where he concludes, "Oh, how happy is this soul, which ever experiences God resting and reposing within it. Oh, how fitting it is for it to withdraw from things, flee from business matters, and live in immense tranquility, so that it may not, even with the slightest speck of dust or noise, disturb or trouble its heart, where the beloved dwells. Since the breathing of the Holy Spirit, is filled with good and glory, the Holy Spirit, through this breathing, filled the soul with good and glory, in which he enkindled it in love of himself, indescribably and incomprehensibly, in the depths of God, to whom be honour and glory for ever and ever. Amen." Well, that's that, I think.